They looked like the perfect couple, the kind everyone rooted for, the kind people sent to group chats and said, "I want that." Short videos, playful arguments, a beautiful wife, a charming husband, a life edited to look effortless. But when the divorce news broke, people started rewatching the clips, the pauses, the forced laughs, the way his eyes lingered off camera, the way her smile never reached her eyes. What no one noticed was who was behind the edits, who cut the footage, who stayed late frame by frame, cleaning up what the audience was never meant to see. That was me. I was their editor. And the first sign something was wrong wasn't the cheating rumors. It was the text message Desmond sent me. Professional enough to excuse, personal enough to feel dangerous. By the time I realized what their content was really doing, what it was hiding, it was already too late. Because some couples don't just sell a fantasy, they trap you inside it. I was 26 when I took the job, old enough to know better, young enough to still believe professionalism could protect you from everything else. Editing was my living. Quiet work, invisible work. I cut for brands, influencers, couples who sold intimacy the way companies sell lifestyle, measured, repeatable, optimized. I had rules. No personal involvement, no private calls, no conversations that didn't live inside an email thread or a project brief. People crossed lines with editors all the time. They mistook proximity for permission. I learned early how to keep distance without making enemies. That's why Kristy and Desmond stood out before I ever touched their footage. They weren't messy. They weren't loud. They were complete. The kind of couple people pointed to online and said, "That's the one." 12 years together. 2 kids. Effortless rhythm. The comments under their videos read, less like praise and more like longing. Strangers used their marriage as a reference point, a proof that something lasting still existed. I didn't idolize couples like that, but I respected the efficiency of the image. When the job offer came through, it was clean. Good rate, clear deliverables, a long-term contract. No red flags, just a calendar invite and a folder link. I remember thinking, this will look good on my resume. The first time I opened their raw footage, I expected polish. What I didn't expect was imbalance. Kristy filled space naturally. She moved even when she stood still. Her energy carried scenes forward, stitched moments together before I ever touched a timeline. Desmond stayed just behind her, always close enough to register as present, never quite leading. Nothing was wrong. Couples had dynamics. I'd edited worse. But as I scrubbed frame by frame, I noticed how often Kristy checked for reaction, glances that landed a half-second late, smiles that waited to be returned. Desmond responded eventually. Always, eventually. I chalked it up to temperament, introvert, reserved. Not everyone performed affection the same way. My first round of edits went out without incident. Tight pacing, light cuts, emphasis on warmth. The response was immediate. Engagement spiked. The brand team was pleased. That night, I got my first message from Desmond. It came through the project channel, nothing informal about it. Great work on the cuts. You have a good eye. That was it. Professional, appropriate. I replied with a thank you and went back to my evening. The next day, more footage, more edits, more moments where Kristy filled the silence before it could settle. I found myself trimming pauses I couldn't explain, tightening beats that felt heavier than they should have. Each adjustment made the videos smoother. Each adjustment made them perform better. I didn't question it. That was the job. A few days later, another message. You notice details most people miss. Still harmless, still work-related, but the phrasing lingered. Not what he said, how precisely he said it. As if he'd been watching more than the edit. I told myself I was projecting. Men in partnerships flirted carelessly sometimes. Compliments slipped. Lines blurred unintentionally. As long as nothing crossed into the explicit, it wasn't worth acknowledging. The next message came late. Not obscene late, just late enough to register. Hope I'm not bothering you. Just wanted to say the way you handled the last sequence, really smart. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. There was no question in the message, no request, no excuse to continue the conversation, just an opening. I didn't respond right away. I told myself I was tired, that I'd answer in the morning when everything felt neutral again. Before I could lock my phone, another message appeared. You really get us. That was when the temperature changed. Not enough to call it inappropriate. Not enough to confront. But enough that I felt it in my chest. The subtle shift from professional appreciation to something else. Interest, maybe. Curiosity. The kind that looks harmless until you realize it's directional. I set my phone face down on the table. On my laptop screen, Kristy was frozen mid-laugh, mouth open, eyes angled just slightly away from the camera. Perfect lighting, perfect frame, a version of happiness people trusted. I understood suddenly that editing wasn't just about shaping footage. It was about deciding what the world was allowed to see. And Desmond knew exactly who held that power. It started small. That was the most frightening part. Desmond didn't say anything that could be screenshot and sent to HR. He didn't cross a line you could draw with a pen. Every message stood alone as reasonable, professional, almost generous. Together, they formed a pattern. The first text came while I was rendering a cut. Quick question about pacing. I answered it. Short, neutral. 5 minutes later. Do you ever feel like some moments say more when you leave them in? That one lingered. Not because it was inappropriate, but because it wasn't necessary. He didn't need my opinion. He already knew what worked. He was testing something else. I didn't respond right away. Another message appeared while the timeline processed. You're very good at reading people. I locked my phone and turned it face down, like that would stop anything. The room felt smaller after that. Same desk, same monitors. But my body reacted before my mind could justify it. Tight shoulders, shallow breath. The faint sensation of being watched even though I was alone. I told myself I was projecting, that men like Desmond were naturally charming. That confidence often came off as intimacy when you weren't used to it. Still, I stopped wearing my hair down during review sessions. The messages didn't stop. They spaced themselves out, polite enough to look accidental. Hope your night's going well. Long edit days, huh? Kristy's energy really carries the frame. You balance it nicely. That last one made my skin crawl. Because I did balance it. I'd been doing it all week, cutting around pauses, trimming moments where Kristy's effort showed too clearly. Smoothing everything until it felt effortless again. I didn't reply. My phone vibrated once, then again. I left it on the desk and kept working, eyes fixed on Kristy, frozen mid-sentence. Her smile was perfect. Her eyes were angled slightly away, like always. Then my phone lit up. Desmond incoming. Call I didn't move. The name sat on the screen, clean and bright, like it belonged there. No emojis, no warning. Just his name and the quiet hum of the phone vibrating against the wood. I imagined his voice, calm, friendly, curious. The kind of tone that could say anything and still sound reasonable afterward. The call stopped. I exhaled too fast, like I'd been holding my breath longer than I realized. A text followed almost immediately. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. Thought it might be easier to talk. Easier for who? My hands shook as I typed. All good. Can we keep things in writing? Easier to track edits. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Of course. Totally understand. I didn't believe him. That night, I barely slept. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, email, calendar reminder, anything, my chest tightened before my brain caught up. The next day, I decided to tell Kristy. Not dramatically, not accusing, just enough to establish a boundary. I rehearsed the phrasing in my head while exporting files. Something neutral, something professional. She joined the call late, already talking. Okay, so the sponsor wants it tighter, she said. People are dropping after the first 30 seconds. Did you see that? I waited for a pause that never came. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded smaller than I expected. Kristy, I just wanted to flag something. Desmond's been reaching out directly, a lot, outside of project notes. She blinked once. Oh, she said. About the edits? Yes, and, well, because the pacing matters, she continued, cutting in smoothly. We're trying to keep momentum. Did you adjust the intro like we discussed? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me yet. I did. I just wanted to make sure we're aligned on communication. She smiled, distracted. Totally, as long as the content lands. She didn't ask what he'd said. She didn't ask how it made me feel. She didn't look concerned, just busy. As she kept talking about thumbnails and retention, I realized something cold and heavy settling in my chest. I wasn't interrupting a marriage. I was interrupting a workflow. And whatever Desmond was doing, quietly, carefully, fit perfectly inside it. That was when I understood the fear wasn't about him calling me again. It was about how easily everything around him made space for it. After the call with Kristy, I couldn't unsee it. Nothing had changed in the footage, not really. Same lighting, same tone, same rhythms I'd been cutting around for weeks. But the way I watched it changed, like a filter had been removed and replaced with something colder. Kristy no longer felt like a person on screen. She felt like inventory. Every clip had a purpose now, and I could see it clearly once I stopped pretending otherwise. The outfits weren't expressions. They were placements. The jokes weren't spontaneous. They were bridges between mentions. Even the way she stood, angled just enough to show the product label, the logo, the texture of whatever she was wearing, felt practiced. I pulled up 3 videos side by side, different days, different locations, different moods, same cadence. Kristy laughed at the same beats, paused at the same intervals, turned her body the same way before each mention. Her hands always entered the frame from the same angle, fingers careful not to block whatever she was holding. I'd edited that rhythm into place. That realization sat heavy in my chest. In the raw footage, Kristy spoke faster now, less silence, no gaps for uncertainty to slip through. If a moment stalled, she filled it instantly, talking, smiling, pivoting toward the next talking point. She didn't wait for Desmond anymore. She didn't look for him either. He was there, technically, in the background, at the edge of the frame, sometimes just out of it. He watched her work the way someone watches a machine they've already calibrated. The comments loved her. She's always hustling. So inspiring. I love how she stays busy. Busy was the word they used most. I started isolating frames. It wasn't intentional at first, just curiosity. A habit editors develop when something feels off, but you can't name it yet. Kristy mid-laugh, Kristy mid-sentence, Kristy holding a product just before the mention. Her eyes were wrong. Not dead, not sad, just vacant, like they were passing through the camera instead of meeting it, like whatever part of her used to check for connection had been reassigned. In older footage, her eyes searched, now they aimed. I stopped correcting the alignment. I wanted to see what happened if I left it alone. The video still performed. Better even. Brands began sending notes directly, requests, preferences, talking points. Kristy absorbed them effortlessly, weaving them into her delivery without missing a beat. She didn't resist. She didn't question. She adapted. Watching her felt like watching someone disappear slowly, not through loss, but through use. I noticed something else then. Kristy never watched playback anymore. During review sessions, her eyes stayed on her phone, emails, DMs, contracts. She didn't ask how she looked, only whether the message landed. How's retention? Did they click? Can we tighten it more? Once I tried to show her a moment I'd left raw. No cut, no polish. A pause, a breath. She waved it away. That won't sell. The word landed wrong. Sell what? The product? The image? Herself? I realized I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Desmond stayed quiet through all of it. He didn't interfere, didn't instruct, didn't object. He let Kristy do what she did best, convert presence into profit. And she did it beautifully, too beautifully. Late one night, while exporting, I pulled up an early clip again, the same one from before. The couch, the quiet, the unguarded version of her. I played it next to a recent ad. The contrast made my throat tighten. In the old footage, Kristy's eyes were alive, not bright, alive. They tracked conversation. They reacted. They waited. In the new footage, her eyes didn't wait for anything. They delivered. I minimized the old clip. It felt invasive now, like watching someone before they learned what they were worth. My phone buzzed, not a message, just a notification from the analytics dashboard. Another campaign performing above expectations. Another brand extending a contract. Kristy was winning. That was the most disturbing part. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't coerced. She wasn't being ruined. She was being optimized. And as I watched her sell another version of herself, smiling, seamless, lifeless, I understood something I hadn't let myself think before. Desmond didn't need to touch her. He didn't need to control her directly. He just needed to stand back and let the system do what it was designed to do. And I was part of it. Every cut, every crop, every moment I chose to keep moving instead of letting her stop. The horror wasn't that Kristy looked empty now. It was that emptiness performed better. And no one, not the brands, not the audience, not even her, wanted to see what she looked like before. It started when my apartment finally went quiet. The kind of quiet you earn by being exhausted. Lights dimmed, laptop closed, my body still humming from hours of work I hadn't been paid to think about. My phone vibrated on the table. Once. I didn't move. It vibrated again, longer this time. The sound crawling across the wood like something alive. I already knew. When I looked, the screen burned too bright in the dark. Desmond, you up? I locked the phone. Another vibration followed immediately. I don't think you understand what this is. I stood, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I hadn't responded to him all day. I'd done everything right. Professional distance, silence, boundaries. The phone rang, not urgent, not frantic, patient. I imagined his voice the way it always was, low, calm, reasonable, a tone that made everything sound survivable if you just listened long enough. The call stopped. A text replaced it. I'm outside. My chest seized. I moved without thinking, checking the lock even though I knew it was locked. The apartment felt exposed now, like the walls had thinned. I didn't look through the peephole. I didn't want confirmation. Another knock, soft, controlled. My phone buzzed again. I just need to talk. I backed into the bedroom and slid into the closet, pulling the door until the light narrowed to a blade. I muted the phone, but the vibration still thudded against my palm. You're not in danger, a message preview read. This isn't about you. That made it worse. I called Kristy. She answered immediately, breathless in a way that suggested movement, not fear. Hey, she said, is this about the campaign numbers? My voice shook. Kristy, Desmond is here, at my apartment. A pause, then, here as in, physically? Yes. I waited for concern, for alarm. Instead, I heard typing. Okay, she said carefully. We need to slow this down. There's nothing to slow down, I whispered. I think he's outside my door. Right, she said. But if this becomes a situation, we need to think about exposure. Exposure, I repeated. Public exposure, she clarified. Context matters, and timing. Another knock echoed faintly through the apartment. Kristy didn't react. You have to understand, she continued. Desmond feels trapped sometimes. He looks for outlets. Outlets. My stomach turned. You mean me? I asked. She didn't answer directly. He doesn't want you, she said finally. He wants space. That's different. What kind of space? I asked. The kind you can step into, she replied smoothly. Temporarily. I felt cold. She kept talking about brand alignment, about how fear narratives performed, about how easily a story could be redirected if framed correctly. She asked if I'd saved the messages, if I'd thought about how I'd be perceived if screenshots surfaced. "You're valuable," she said gently. "People trust you. That trust can be leveraged." Leveraged. I realized then she wasn't dismissing my fear. She was absorbing it, the way she absorbed everything else. "I'm hiding in my closet," I said. "Please tell him to leave." She sighed, not irritated, strategic. "That would make him feel rejected," she said. "And rejection creates volatility. We don't want volatility." I hung up. The knock didn't come again. That silence was worse than the sound. Minutes passed, or seconds. Time collapsed into the narrow space of my breathing. Then I heard something slide along the floor. A soft sound, paper against wood. When I finally opened the closet, the apartment was empty. The door was still locked. On the floor, just inside the frame, was a folded note. No envelope, no name. I picked it up with shaking hands. 3 words, written carefully, not rushed, not panicked. "Help me be free." That was all. I sat on the floor, the paper heavy in my palm. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't protection. It was a request. Desmond wasn't trying to save me from Kristy. He was trying to escape her through me, through women, through attention, through moments that weren't his life. Kristy didn't cage him. She built him a castle, gold-plated, profitable, efficient. And every time he reached for someone else, it wasn't rebellion. It was an exit attempt, a way to breathe before returning to the walls that paid him. My phone buzzed again. Not Desmond. A notification from the analytics dashboard. Engagement up, brand interest rising, momentum holding. Kristy was winning. Desmond was coping. And I was standing at the edge of a system that didn't need consent to consume you, only access. I stared at the note one last time before folding it closed, because now I understood the real danger. Not that Desmond wanted me, but that Kristy had already decided how I could be used. And once you became useful to the castle, it never let you go. I thought my job was done. That was the assumption that let me breathe again. The divorce announcement came quietly, folded into Kristy's feed, between a wellness post and a sponsored link. The language was precise: mutual respect, gratitude, separate journeys. I read it the way I'd learned to read everything, like an editor, not a person. The pacing was right. The sentiment neutral, the optics airtight. The marriage hadn't collapsed. It had been closed. Online, the response was immediate and orderly. Sympathy without confusion, nostalgia without anger. Old clips resurfaced, reframed as warnings people claimed they'd always noticed. Moments I'd once trimmed for humor were now proof. The audience felt intelligent for seeing it late, never realizing how carefully their eyes had been guided. I shut my laptop and didn't open it again. A few days later, I saw Desmond. Not in person, never that dramatic. In photos, out at dinner with another woman, younger, quieter. His hand resting on her back lightly, not possessive, temporary. A week later, another image, different woman, same expression. He looked free, not in love, not happy, unburdened. I understood then what he'd been doing all along. He wasn't searching for connection. He was searching for exits. Each woman a doorway out of the golden castle he lived in. Each one a place to breathe before returning to the walls that fed him. Kristy never paused. Her content shifted seamlessly. New chapter. Alignment. Choosing myself. The cadence didn't change. The lighting didn't change. The smile didn't change. Only her eyes did. They were emptier now. Not tired. Not sad. Efficient. Like something that no longer needed to check for approval because it already understood demand. I told myself I was finished. That whatever role I'd played ended with the marriage. That night, I lay in bed with my phone on the nightstand. The room dark and still. The kind of stillness that feels earned. My body finally began to unclench. Then the phone rang. I didn't reach for it immediately. I waited for the vibration to stop, for it to roll to voicemail. It didn't. When I turned my head, the screen lit the ceiling faintly. "Kristy," I answered. Her voice was calm, warm, focused, like we'd spoken earlier that day. "I hope I'm not calling too late," she said. "It's fine," I replied, though it wasn't. "I wanted to talk," she continued. "Things are moving fast, and I wanted you to hear it from me." I waited. "I'm doing a rebrand," she said. She spoke the word the way someone else might say healing, like it was personal, earned. "Not a pivot," she added, "a refinement." She talked about tone, about alignment, about shaping the next phase so the audience would feel safe following her into it. She spoke about vulnerability the way brands talk about scarcity, something powerful if released in controlled amounts. "I've been looking at old content," she said, "what worked, what people trusted." My chest tightened. "And I realized something," she went on. "I don't want someone who's watched me. I want someone who understands me." A pause. "That's you." I sat up in bed. "I'm not editing anymore," I said. I stepped away. "I know," she replied instantly. "That's actually why this works." She spoke about clarity, about protection, about telling the story before anyone else could distort it. She used words I recognized from brand calls, from analytics decks, from moments where something human was turned into something scalable. "You know where the cuts belong," she said. "You always have." I swallowed. "Why are you telling me this?" There was no hesitation. "Because you stayed," she said. "You saw everything and you stayed." I felt cold. "This isn't about moving on, is it?" I asked. She laughed softly, not amused, relieved. "No," she said. "It never was." She continued outlining the rebrand, how the divorce would be framed, how sympathy would convert, how control would be maintained without ever looking like control. She spoke the way she always had, calm, efficient, assured. When she finally paused, I asked quietly, "Why do all of this?" There was a brief silence. Not uncertainty, calculation. Then she said it. "The content was always my payback." The words settled into me slowly, like something sinking. Before I could respond, the line went dead. No goodbye, no invitation, no emotion. Just the quiet click of a call ending. I lay there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, understanding at last what the marriage had really been. Not love, not loss, leverage. Desmond had used women to escape the castle. Kristy used people to expand it. And the most terrifying part wasn't that she'd won. It was that she never needed anyone to lose. She just needed them to stay visible long enough to be useful. I turned the phone face down and closed my eyes. If this story unsettled you, it's because you recognize something real in it. Stories like this don't survive unless people choose to keep them visible. If you want more psychological horror like this, stories about power, perception, and what happens behind the performance, like this video and subscribe. Because the most dangerous stories aren't the ones that scream, they're the ones that look familiar.